Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Cliff from Cliff's Edge, and you've joined the live stream. I think I see David Schuster here a little bit early, too. I was going to go rant and roll and rock, and I can always rant later. There's plenty to talk about with Ghislaine, Glenn. I don't know. Why can't you just, spell your name how you want us to say it? It would be easier. Then we could keep track of more sexual predators. We're going to talk about the sickening fact that, of course, Trump is kind of heading in the direction of a pardon, and I don't think it's going to save him. He's played into too many long-time conspiracies from that existed on the far right. They always involve children, even though it's always right-wing Christians who are like lowering the age of marriage in places like Tennessee and Kentucky to like 11. That's a whole other story. Actually, it's not another story. It's the same story, which is when the other does it, like, a guy with a name like Epstein or somebody who has a name like Obama, which they have tried to lie about. Then it's terrible, as you may know from things like Birth of a Nation and the entire Lost Cause about how black men supposedly loved white women and couldn't resist them, and why they ended up killing Emmett Till, even though, as we all know, it was white slave owners who were doing the raping. And Jews, that goes back to biblical times of us drinking the blood of Christian children, and that is an old thing they plan to. So, you've got everything you want here in these conspiracies. And even if the Alex Joneses of the world and people like that don't really believe it, let me invite David in for this conversation. Hey, David, I was going to rant on this. Good. Thank you for being here, my Emmy award-winning co-host and friend.
I'm sorry you have not yet done your rant, but you sent it out like you were off to a good start right there.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to rant about, but I can still get plenty pissed about it later and do it. So, but, I mean, that's the basic, I would say, theory here, which of mine. I think there's a couple potential reasons, and we've talked about all of them. It's like we've been circling them the last few weeks. Let's call it like a shark and a battery, if you will. We've been basically talking about, what are the reasons the far right has turned on him? Well, Putin was pissed because he was embarrassed by the drones by Zelensky, another Jew, that went in and destroyed Russian planes for very little cost to Zelensky, billions in losses of Russian warplanes. It embarrassed Putin. He hasn't been able to take Ukraine. That was Trump's one job, literally the one thing they changed in the 2016 platform. It's the reason Putin wanted him there, and he's failed him. Clearly, he told him not to bomb Iran. He did. There's been a lot of public back and forth that says Putin is done with him. Then you've got the myth that they built a lot of the far-right conspiracy based on, Q and all that garbage about, pedophile ring on the left, Hillary and Bill, and, and again, it's using the other, right? Liberal, democratic, cosmopolitan, black, Jewish, this, that, is, they tie into conspiracy theories they've used to attack the other for, in some cases, hundreds of years, some cases, thousands. And they've now trained their whole base on this, that we have to save these kids that are, that are suffering from this, when the truth is their own guy was the one tied into the guy doing it. We know from, again, allegedly, we don't have to, I mean, he's an adjudicated rapist, so that's a fact. The way he's spoken about women, the 28 women that have accused him, the way he talked about young girls, snuck into beauty pageants, these are all things we know about. What he did with Epstein is the only thing we don't know about, but that would be the last piece to the puzzle. And they're all pissed. Stuart Rhodes, the guy, of what was it? Patriot, Oath Keepers? I don't know. They all have stupid names like that. Whichever group, the one that worked for Rand Paul for a while and is on the far right, he just yesterday was saying, if we don't get those files, implying like we've got a January 6th coming along, but at Mar-a-Lago. Like, that's the level to which they're threatening Trump. Candace Owens, again, threatening Trump again yesterday. So he tapped into like this deep well of, right-wing fear of the other attacking their children and women, and, whether it be a Jewish, black, this, that. And that is such an old ingrained thing. And they can't unring that bell. And even the ones who don't believe it, Alex Jones, during his lawsuit against him by the Newtown families, admitted he didn't believe any of this stuff. He just does it for money. Let's say he doesn't believe any of it. He knows he'll lose his audience if he does that. So now the incentives have changed. The incentives are not to support Trump. They're to attack him on this.
Yeah, and I think even most Trump supporters, and the polling will back this up, see right through Donald Trump's efforts to try and redirect his audience and to distract them by moving on to something else. I mean, Donald Trump has tried everything from renaming the Washington Commanders back to the Washington Redskins. He's speaking out about pure races. And now, of course, he goes back to what he thought was maybe his Trump card, so to speak, and that is, oh, Barack Obama committed treason.
Right.
That sort of falls apart.
The black president.
That falls apart when you look at the substance of what Donald Trump is accusing Barack Obama of doing, and we can get into that later. But my point is that Donald Trump is throwing everything possible to try to get his MAGA audience all revved up about something else. And maybe some of them are buying into the nonsense about Obama, but they're still demanding the Epstein files. And there was, Thomas Massey from Kentucky saying, okay, the House is going out of session until September, but if you don't release all of the files, and keep in mind, again, Donald Trump has asked Pam Bondi to release selected grand jury transcripts, that's not good enough for a lot of these folks. Right. And Massey is saying, if you don't release everything by the time we come back, we're going to have this vote again in September. We're not letting this go. And in the meantime, there's this drip, drip, drip of information coming out about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and photographs showing the extent of their friendship. And Donald Trump is freaking out.
Right. And the letter he wrote, the wedding, they're at his wedding to Marla Maples. Here's this, by the way, whenever they try to change the subject, see if we can get this in here. So that's what we're going to change the name of the Washington team to. That is what I believe we should call them. I think I see Dan Perry here. And I think we're going to bring Dan in to join us in this conversation about Epstein. I think Dan can speak to anti-Semitism, among other things. We can talk to each other in Philly accents if we want. Dan Perry, who is based in, is a former, let's see, how many parts of the world did you run the AP in, Dan? Pretty much every continent at some point?
Yeah, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Caribbean, and part of South America.
Only part of South America? Like, what were you doing? Were you screwing around? They didn't want to give you the whole thing, huh?
They didn't. Nor Asia. It's very embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to live with that. Dan is still is a writer, has a great Substack that you're going to give me the name of right now, Dan, so we can tell everybody about.
Ask questions later.
Ask questions later.
The whole world. Unlike,
and you know what? I'm subscribed to it, Dan. I apologize. I'm just too stupid to remember anything. So my kid is having a test, is having his driver's test today. So like my head is in place.
Oh, that's important. That's more important than anything else. But no, you're not too stupid to have one of the world's most successful Substacks. So you got something going on.
Well, Donald Trump's president. I mean, we're in a world that is no longer defined by
it's not a
meritocracy if you're good. I mean, Kim Kardashian probably has the most popular TV show. At this point, you can fall in a pile of poop and just get lucky. But I do appreciate the kind words. But in any case, I should have known it to ask the question. I'm just having, not the clearest brain moment right now.
Well, let me start, Dan.
David Schuster, do you guys know each other?
No, it's an honor to meet you, Dan. And one of the biggest questions that I have right now for all of us is, as Donald Trump is trying to redirect away from Jeffrey Epstein and try to get his base revved up about Barack Obama, is it working? And I think it's not working to a certain extent. I mean, members of Congress see right through it. But what's your take? I mean, is it possible for Donald Trump to distract and redirect again, or is he cornered this time?
I think history has shown that he's a little bit Teflon and he can get away with stuff that no one else possibly can. I also try to look at this from, strategically, what do we really care about? He's not going to go for a third term. The only thing that matters, really, the only thing that could constrain his madness is a humiliating loss in the next midterm election. So will this affect his base? Maybe. I mean, they had this pedophilia conspiracy theory obsession, and this seems to attach to that. So you can sort of see where maybe it would, except this would require them to be consistent and to care about the facts. And I hate to say it, but it kind of looks like a third of America doesn't. I mean, they're in thrall of this guy, not just that. It's the center that might abandon him maybe over this, not all of it, but maybe 5-10%, and that could make the difference. So would his unbelievably embarrassing and completely inadmissible friendship with Epstein, to the degree that has been revealed, is that going to cause the necessary 2-3-4% to shift by 2026? I hope so. I'm not counting on it though, because I mean, he won an election after everything we knew. I think a lot depends on what the Democrats do, frankly.
I think that's a good point. I mean, again, I don't write Trump off ever, because we have this sort of system right now, this combination of failures. We have what I refer to response to, constantly as a monopoly media, that 6 entities own 90% of what we see and hear and everything, why we're trying to build up independent media. And they won't cover anything. They've covered this because there's spectacle in it. Which is what Democrats never seem to be able to learn, that you have to, if there isn't already, you must create spectacle for people to pay attention. You have to do something different. And then it's Democrats, it's corporate media, it's the right has such a well-funded propaganda machine. But the only reason I think it's different is because I think so many of these right-wingers over this have backed themselves into a corner, the entertainers, and all they care about is the money they bring in. Trump's just useful to them. And if they abandon him, call them influencers if you want, they're not all just sort of online people. Some of them are radio hosts or, TV shows, whatever. But if they do keep attacking him in these ways, I do think that can, as you said, look, 33% is generous. It may be close to 40% that don't live in reality. But there are a lot of plus 10 Republican districts out there where if we were able to take enough folks off and we won those seats, it would be an FDR kind of landslide. So
I agree. Is it the Epstein thing that will cause that to happen, as opposed to, for example, the brain deadness of the tariffs? I don't know, but maybe something would. I mean,
or a combination, maybe,
Or maybe even once the Medicare and Medicaid cuts kick in from this new bill they passed, and we start seeing all the stories next year of the hospitals closing and the people, losing everything. Maybe that also starts to move numbers a little bit. In other words, it gets back to a traditional policy debate.
Look, a lot depends on the media, and I spent 28 years in the mainstream media, and for a while I was so proud of it. It really was. I mean, we have seen a complete breakdown of journalism in the past couple of years, where just because, a huge percentage of what he says is either false or transparent lies, and therefore it looks like if you call him out, you're partisan. I understand it's a problem, but there are ways to deal with that problem, and the media failed by hardly calling out anything. I understand, Washington Post and AP and New York Times may do some fact checks, but it's so pathetically inadequate compared to the global historic, practically, and I don't want to be attacked for making a comparison, but Goebbelsian aspect of the non-stop, coast to coast, dawn to dusk to midnight.
Flood of BS. Yes.
Oh my God. And they treat, they normalize this stuff by just repeating it with the very slightest of, skepticism. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And you guys, I mean, look, I wrote a column at the Daily Beast and a column for the Guardian, and so I could say I worked for some mainstream outlets, but I mean, you two, between you, Dan, running numerous high-profile jobs at the AP, David as an anchor at MSNBC and CNN, and that other outlet early in his career we won't name. But I mean, you guys really. And so, I mean, I can only imagine what you've seen in this decline. And to me, it's always the big thing is that media was supposed to provide context. And if you're just saying, they're like, well, we've done stories on how Donald Trump has lied. And it's like, but if it doesn't come close to matching, I think you're just saying, Dan, the breadth of what he's doing, if it's not in the context of, well, Donald Trump told 247 lies today, Joe Biden, or pick anybody, Kamala Harris told 2, we're going to make it equal, as opposed to showing that one side told 247 and giving people the context of the difference, then you're failing because you're not,
Look, the media should be telling the people every day, all day, that tariffs on Chinese goods are paid by Americans and not Chinese. People don't know this.
Yep.
It's insane that they don't. And part of the reason is that the media doesn't tell them. People generally are not experts in economics or tech or anything else. They really do need contextualizing. I mean, every day the mainstream media picks certain facts to present. The very selection of facts is itself an opinion about what's important and what needs to be known. And they have made a choice to basically let this administration get away with nonstop lies. And
Yeah.
that's,
And this guy
of
in
course,
general for a
Fox,
decade, right?
but I have to say, the right-wing media may have the special place in hell, because you know, I understand that the rest of the former regular, a broadcast network type mainstream media, they try to appear nonpartisan, and they sometimes they do fact checks and so forth. But where the audience that really needs to be, you know, schooled is the right wing media, and they just vehiculate the lies and amplify them without the slightest shame. And you're talking about intelligent people who
And
know
yeah, to
better.
your point, I mean, I was, shocked looking up at Fox News and even CNBC to a certain extent when Donald Trump announced we have a trade deal with Japan. It was as if Donald Trump had brought manna from heaven, if you're listening to the right wing. And then when you start to peel back and actually dig into the story, and you find out, okay, well, Japan is still going to be, I mean, their goods are still going to be subjected to a 15% tax, which we're going to have our taxpayers pay. And oh, by the way, Japan doesn't tariff any of our goods, which I thought was the whole reason why Donald Trump was imposing these tariffs. You come to the conclusion, this is a worse deal than doing nothing.
Absolutely
But
worse.
you never hear that on the right-wing media.
And it comes from this infantile notion that trade is somehow a contest, and if I sell you more than you sell me, I won. And that's ridiculous. I mean, I run a trade deficit with Amazon, and I'm happy because they have stuff I want to buy. It is infantile, and you really do need analysis and explainers and commentary. I mean, you just do, and it's not just about the facts, because every day on this planet brings 20 trillion facts. We're going to make a choice about what to present, and I think the mainstream media is being dishonest and running away from that fundamental truth that you never have 100% objectivity. Otherwise, us three meeting here today on Cliff's Substack would be, headline news in the New York Times. But someone decided it's not worthy of that, and that's an opinion.
See, that is so important, Dan, because that was the thing, and that was the thing that really led my charge in just finally the final straw, unsubscribing and spending the last decade pounding the New York Times, was the Hillary email coverage.
Oh,
it was in the context of it. It was, yeah, you get to cover that. Yeah, that she screwed up with a few emails. Yeah, you can tell. But my God, when you saw those word clouds, that the email story was the biggest story. Here we're talking about a guy at that point in time who hadn't been convicted yet, hadn't been an adjudicated rapist, but had women accusing him of all sorts of things, had shady business practices that were sitting right there out in the open for people to look at. It clearly, something like of all his condos, some ridiculous percent were bought by shell companies, 60% or whatever it was. So you knew he was laundering money. I mean, these are things that if anybody wanted to provide context to people that don't know these things, you would do your damn job and you would do that. But they just obsessed. And of course, with Comey doing that thing and them covering the front page of the newspaper a week before an election, it's such malpractice. And that was, again, that was a choice.
If Comey doesn't commit that dopey malpractice, does Hillary win that election?
I think absolutely. And I think Comey changed the entire world, maybe destroyed it. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it. I still think we're going to come out of this on the other side, I think, with a lot of damage. But yeah, it took a combination of Comey, the New York Times' stupidity. I try to tell people, and David can speak to this, certainly from having grown up in maybe wasn't as bad back then, in Bloomington, Indiana. But I can tell you, living in Cincinnati, people just don't understand how important a few outlets are. The New York Times, because they don't have the money in mid-sized cities anymore for real reporting. So the Cincinnati Enquirer is bare bones. Okay. It's like a pamphlet. So what they do is they take their cues from the New York Times, the Washington Post, as to what reality is. So the New York Times is spending all their time on email, all their time on emails. Then the Cincinnati Enquirer is, the Columbus Dispatch is, actually, the Cleveland Plain Dealer is one of the few places where Chris Quinn, their editor, said, we're not doing this crap. We're going to cover this, as the truth. And they are one of two newspapers I'm aware of, the Philadelphia Inquirer, that actually did an amazing job and covered stuff the way mainstream media should. But most of these kinds of newspapers don't, and that's why people don't get when I try to explain to them why I find the New York Times so vile is they act so flippant about these things. Like what they did had world altering consequences there. And there's no other way to put it.
I agree.
That was a choice. You get a choice in that's context, what you choose to cover versus what you don't. So I don't know. But I mean, you guys being inside of this beast, at least for more years, maybe you can both speak to it. You probably saw some of this at least going on even before Trump, I would think. We were headed in that direction, weren't we?
Well, I think they're terrified to look partisan. That's basically the issue. So, and then they end up bending over backwards. And also, they don't want to be activist-y. So if you tell them, look, people, I mean, you're not just bending over backwards and doing readers of the service, but you're going to bring about Armageddon by getting Trump elected. They don't tend to want to say, all right, yeah, I should cloud my journalistic judgment and, introduce
prevent Armageddon.
Yeah, and like introduce a political position that I'd prefer to avoid Armageddon into my journalistic choices. And I'm not saying that's illegitimate journalistically. I'm saying it's illegitimate as a citizen. So sometimes life is imperfect and messy. And if you end up fetishizing journalistic neutrality to the point of indifference to what happens in the world, including perhaps your own life, then I'm not sure you're necessarily being the best journalist. It's complex, but in the end, it's also simple.
I also wonder if, news organizations and the companies that own them are now sort of operating the way so many corporate, entities have operated for years, and that is only looking at the short term. Because, I mean, the damage that, for example, CBS has inflicted on itself by kowtowing to Donald Trump through this settlement, through the president of CBS News, the head of the 60 Minutes, the executive producer leaving, now Colbert essentially being fired. I mean, there are generations that will never come back to CBS. And so Donald Trump's not going to be around forever, but if CBS wants to be around forever, they've got to figure out a way at some point how to get their audience back. And I think they will long be remembered as an organization that caved to Donald Trump. And I have to say, I was heartened by, when Donald Trump was going after all these law firms and some of the law firms that decided, yeah, we'll just pay out Donald Trump. Suddenly they lost a lot of clients, some of them. And I thought, aha, some people get it. Some people are saying, oh, I'm not going to give my money to a law firm that's caving to Donald Trump. I'm not going to give my time to a media organization like CBS, which is caving to Donald Trump. So Absolutely. Those news organizations, I think they're in some long-term trouble.
No doubt. It's said that people get what they deserve, and that's generally thought to relate to who they vote for, but it's also who you choose to boycott or to patronize. And we should remember things like just what you noted now. I mean, it is shameful. I'm frankly amazed at the stupidity of some large institutions led by well-paid people.
Yeah, right. And a lot of them have been doing that. They've been sort of, preemptively, like just giving in and so the ones like Harvard that have stood up have been these heroes when it's sort of like, it's cool. I'm glad they did it, but like, why is everybody doing that?
It's craven cowardice. The very same reasons why they caved to, forgive me, but a progressive orthodoxy that way overreached is the same reason why they totally caved in the other direction, almost did a 180 the minute another pressure came to bear. I mean, you would think that decency and independence of thought would prevail at places like my alma maters, which are Penn and Columbia, but it isn't always the case.
We went to the same two schools, so we can both be pissed off at the same two places. Dan.
I was pissed off at both variants.
As I say, they've failed on all sides of all equations.
Yeah, truly.
Incredible. All right. Well, so you're based in the never maligned state of Israel.
Yeah, that's true.
How's that going, Dan?
Israel's in a world of trouble. When I talk to people about the situation here in Netanyahu, I say the following. I say, because I read a lot about Bibi and about Trump on my Substack, and I try to dilute it with a lot of other stuff, but these two miscreants are a big part of what's going on in the world. I say that the U.S. will survive Trump. I mean, it's painful, might, lose an eye, but Israel will not survive Bibi if Bibi and his ilk stay in power. And, Israel has no term limits. And there is the ilk is very important. If Bibi goes, but some variant stays, if the right religious bloc in Israel stays in power, and this is a prediction, there is no Israel by 2048. It doesn't exist.
Really? You think there's no Israel by 2048? If
Yeah,
Netanyahu
I mean,
power?
I'm being facile because that would be the 100-year mark of its existence. Yeah, 23 years. Words cannot explain the degree of toxicity that is going on here. It is extremely likely that eventually Democrats come back to power, and they will not be at all happy with the kind of Israel that you see in power today, which will only get worse and worse if they stay in power. And consider that the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, that are driving a lot of the madness here, they're having 7 kids apiece, doubling as a percentage of the population every 18 years as a consequence. They're currently about a sixth. That means in less than 40 years, they're a majority. Now, when this starts becoming more and more inevitable because no one stopped it, the part of Israel that is startup nation, the part of Israel that most Americans think of is the industrious part of Israel, the modern, mostly secular and liberal part of Israel. They're going to go. They're very mobile. It's a very wealthy society. They're going to go, and it's going to snowball. And what's going to be left is an underclass and fascistic settlers and ultra-Orthodox Jews who don't teach their boys in high school math, English, and science, who want the women to basically, stick to stereotypical women roles, who refuse to go to the army and fight the wars they start by being Israel's most anti-Arab community. I mean, it is absolute madness. And currently, that birth rate is being sustained by generous government subsidies whenever the right wing is in power, because the right wing has never had a majority without their parties. In short, there is a world of hurt coming Israel's way, because the Israel that will be left, if the half of it that is what invented, the discount key leaves, will not be one that will have a qualitative edge on the Arab world, and they'll be made mincemeat of.
How do you dislodge? I mean, the dude's a criminal. Obviously, hey, we got some stuff in common. Bibi's a criminal. Bibi's not a racist. Bibi is, I could go on and on. How can they not find a way to dislodge this guy?
Well, I mean, he has a majority in parliament, and that majority is composed purely of lemmings who will not do anything to bring him down. And the opposition is hapless because the opposition is very nice liberals, and all over the world, including in America, the very nice liberals don't know. I was going to
tell you, if you think very nice liberals, because if you have a lot of faith in us here, the analysis you're giving sounds a hell of a lot like America. No. Sounds why I was starting to think of looking for property in Italy when I was there. So,
I mean, and you wouldn't be unwise to hedge your bets. I mean, it sounds un-American, unpatriotic, but I mean, the America that we see now throwing its weight around is no longer a shining city on a hill. It's not a leader of the free world. It may not be part of the free world. It's madness. I mean, you look at how MAGA loves Putin but hates Europe. Something has mutated into a cockroach here. I mean, it's very Kafkaesque. I have to think we're going to recover, but if we don't, then America is just another big country with currently the world's biggest economy throwing its weight around and, being a bit of an asshole. I mean, Italy seems pretty attractive to me if that's the way it's going to continue. But I'm actually optimistic it won't.
That's interesting.
While you're optimistic, and I was gonna lean into the idea of optimism, because there have been moments where, for people who are not so familiar with Israel, where Labor, the sort of center-left party in Israel, has defeated Netanyahu's party before, Likud.
Yeah.
And there have been, a lot of Americans look up and see the hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have been on the streets protesting Netanyahu, protesting the Gaza war, protesting his policies. I feel like there's still a chance that Israel, at least politically, moves back and tacks back to the left.
David lived there for a bit, by the way, Dan, as context to this conversation. Didn't you, David?
Yeah, I lived there as a teen for a year, and then I've been back several times, both covering for NBC, but then also I was with Al Jazeera and spent a lot of time in the Middle East. So, and Israel's always been a passion of mine. But it just, I sort of share the optimism. I mean, I share the sense that if Israel continues on the same path, sure, it's in a lot of trouble within the next 20 years. But I'm also optimistic, thinking that, well, there's still this very strong, defiant group of Israelis that are protesting on a regular basis. And I feel like at a certain point, and also Netanyahu has yet to be held accountable for, I mean, it was under his watch that October 7th happened. And if you want to have the right-wing extreme view of what Israel should do and what a leader should do, and that is to keep the Jewish people in Israel safe, just on that point, Netanyahu failed.
Netanyahu is about as good as Trump at evading accountability for terrible things that he either did or was responsible for having happen. I mean, he's very skilled at this. He's skilled at it in an intellectual way. Trump is skilled at it in a sort of
animalistic, like,
schoolboy, schoolyard bully kind of way, but he does it brilliantly. Trump does. Bibi is like brilliantly intellectual about avoiding and strategic. So, for example, October 7th, Bibi understood, I can't win this argument. Like my screw up was maximal and global historic epic.
Didn't he move? Can I ask Dan, just for the context for people know? I mean, didn't he move a lot of their protective forces to these guys, these idiots settling the West Bank instead of protecting the southern flank?
So just to understand, David, you're mentioning how the left might come back, the center left they call themselves now. Yes, they might. The question of moving votes. So days after this government came to power, the justice minister announced judicial reforms that basically would have turned Israel into Turkey and Russia light. It's an idea that Trump also favors, and it's an idea that the populist right favors, which is an elected government does what the hell it wants, because that's the voice of the people they were elected. You have to explain to people, this means they can kill you because they were elected. You want that? But no one does, because the liberals are too nice. So the plan that they proposed was so awful that it moved about 15% of the vote. It just did. So all of a sudden, the government's polling at like under 40%, well under, for about a year. Now, during this time, the security chiefs are telling Bibi, you're causing such a rupture in this country that we're looking vulnerable and that we're going to face an attack. He refused to meet with them. In as late as September 2023, he refused to meet with the heads of the Mossad, military, and Shin Bet because he said, you're political.
Amazing.
Then this happens. He understood he can't win this argument because he looks pretty bad. So he decided, I'm not going to have the argument. I need a very long war that will create such a huge pandemonium that it'll be a whole different discussion. The discussion will be so big about tens of thousands of people killed in Gaza and a victory over Iran and a thrashing of Hezbollah, just all this stuff that happened. That October 7th will look small, but also time will pass because I'm going to sell the people a narrative that's going to work. And that narrative is, we're in a war. The time for accounting will come, but only after the war. That obviously incentivizes a forever war. Really smart people got that, and we're going, wait a minute, this logic is false. But he's smart, and he's able to project a message convincingly.
Sounds a lot like Bush with Iraq after 9/11.
Yeah,
just
Bush
patriotic. Everybody come together. Nobody talk about the August 6th presidential briefing. Bin Laden determined to attack inside of America when Bush was really doing important stuff, clearing that brush on the ranch, and so he doesn't want to have that conversation. It's amazing how Iraq and places changed that conversation.
Absolutely. But look, here's the bottom line to maybe finish off my long answer to a short question. Netanyahu will lose the next election, which has to be held by October 6th, unless he reframes the narrative, because all he's done is delayed the accounting. Polls still show that he's going to lose by 60 to 40, by 70 to 50 Knesset seats. So by 20 Knesset seats, about 20%. He's going to lose, unless there's a whole different story. So if he's smart, he ends the war just by saying, well, I decided now it's enough. And, like Trump, all the lemmings will follow. Now it's enough. Ends the war, leaves, 1/10 of Hamas in charge of the devastation in Gaza. That's no longer an entity that can do October 7th. And he says that, so it's fine. Gets back what's left of the hostages. They celebrate that maximally. Does peace with Saudi Arabia. And maybe tries to do a deal with Lebanon. And all of a sudden, there's Nobel Prizes. There's a whole different narrative. A few, quibblers will say everything I've just been saying, but that may no longer at that point be majority. If he's smart, that's what he does, and he's smart. So expect changes in the next couple of months. If I'm wrong and he's not smart, then he will actually go down in flames. And that may be better for Israel than peace with Saudi Arabia.
I would think Netanyahu gone would inevitably have to be much better for Israel and the world. I mean, again, I mean, this group of strong men. I mean, you're saying right there with Erdogan and Putin, and I mean, these guys are it's like they're a dictators club destroying the world, getting together and I mean, massacring people in their areas and whatever. And frankly, that includes obviously the leadership of Iran, who are awful. I mean, nobody's off the hook here. They don't suddenly get off the hook for
Sure.
women not wearing a hijab and being murdered for it.
No, Iran's terrible, but it's interesting. These are dictators who figure out how to get elected in some cases with minimal or no election interference. So elections in Israel are fair. Elections in America are fair. Elections in Turkey are almost fair. And these guys get elected through gaslighting, manipulation of media, a great amount of cleverness, and frankly, and I don't know, I might make myself unelectable in the U.S. by making my own deplorables comment, but by a stupefaction of the people, which is achieved through social media and through bad education and through certain policies and through a kind of brilliance of the dictator in question.
Dan, I mean, you mentioned that the political sort of winds and which way they're blowing right now, but let's assume that the situation remains the same. Putting aside the politics and what may happen in an election, what's the sort of general mood among Israelis right now? I mean, if you go back, I mean, they've been through so much with October 7th and the long Gaza war and what's happened with Iran. And so there's been a lot that Israelis have weathered. Are people optimistic like you? Are they pessimistic? I mean, where's the general mood right now?
Well, it's internally schizophrenic. The same people are feeling great and feeling terrible, and also it's a very heterogeneous society. So there's different kinds of people, like in America. But I would say, if put a gun to my head, what's the mood? The mood is foul. This government, even its supporters, know that this government lives by toxicity and by divide and conquer tactics, and by being negative about everything, and by having there be no patriotism and total cynicism. It's horrendous. One of the leading lights of the coalition, when asked what his philosophy of life was, this is a politician on national TV, so this is how dumb he is. He says, "My goals in life are power, money, and respect." Now, he said that not afraid of losing votes, because like Trump and MAGA, the 1/3 that's their hardcore, that supports them and maybe keeps them in power if they can machinate other machinations, are okay with that. They're okay with a complete lack of decency. They're okay with bone-crushing cynicism. And that's what you see in America. And that is what you see in these other countries that have fallen prey to these horrible dictators.
I almost think, Dan, and I hate to say this again, like I think you're almost, there's that group of people. And then I think there's this hard right that actually enjoys it. Like, it's not that they're okay with it. Like they're excited by it.
No, I agree.
They're getting their their UFC. He's throwing them UFC fights on the White House lawn. They want to see people in pain. They want to see people suffer. They're happy for kids to not have the food to eat. I mean, we have to like you brought up deplorables. There are a certain number among them that are in every one of these countries that are sick people.
People who are frustrated by their own lack of success want to bring down other people, and therefore they also want to burn down the house. And a lot of this far-right populism is about burning down the house. You have Trump actually talking about dismantling the Department of Education. Yeah, there's issues. Yeah, a bit of wokery, fine, but come on, Department of Education. And he's not afraid about how bad a look it is. You're talking about gutting FEMA when we're having more and more natural disasters. You're talking about this thing with the Fed that's going to screw up the dollar. All of it is mind-boggling, and yet about 10, 20, maybe 30% do want the house to be burned down because they don't have two nickels to rub together, and they're just angry, and they have all kinds of frustrations that I can't even talk about on the Family Channel.
Well, and speaking of family, I mean, one of the things that I find so ironic about all of this is that, some of the strongest supporters of Donald Trump are people who are evangelical Christians, families who talk about family values, and yet they have a leader who is anything but the gospel, the preachings of Jesus. And to your point about Israel, it's almost, there's a similarity, right? Because there's nothing Jewish, there's nothing in Judaism about promoting money, power, and respect as being what drives you. And so here we have a religious right in the United States, which is total hypocrisy. And then you're also, it sounds like we're sensing that as well among the Israeli right.
Oh, 100%. And more than this, among the specifically religious right and the Haredi population. You know, Maimonides, probably the most famous Jewish scholar, one of his fundamental tenets was you cannot live off religion. You're a rabbi, fine, but like you also be a baker or something. And this parasitical group is insisting on spending their whole lives in Jewish seminaries and being paid for it. Like, you know, my kids got to pay tuition. They receive tuition. Their whole lives are subsidized. They have the lowest participation rate in the workforce of any population. They won't do the armies, I say. They're living off their religion and insisting on the government subsidizing of make-work fake jobs, you know, supervising kosherness in restaurants that don't want it. I mean, it's shameful and utterly un-Jewish. You're totally right. By the way, the Jewish religion is not evil and not racist. They're exclusionary, and I think they're like the best. And, you know, they're not missionary like Christianity. They're not trying to spread Judaism at all. So there's a bit of superiority complex, fine, but you know, not racist. Whereas the Haredi population in Israel is by far the most anti-Arab.
Yeah.
The more religious you get in Israel, the more you see horrible, you know, notions about the Arabs. Now, the Arabs have earned a lot of that. Like what happened October 7th was obviously terrible, and the Arabs have not, you know, prosecuted their affairs very wisely in 100 years of conflict with Zionism. Fine. But you get closer and closer to racism, the more religious a constituency is in Israel. And again, what does that tell you about religion in any country?
Well, it's the same in every country is the thing. I mean, if you look at the folks, I mean, there's exceptions to that, but when Putin wanted to consolidate power, he started embracing a far-right version of Orthodox Christianity that became much more anti-gay and anti-Semitic and that kind of thing. You look in India, you have the same thing, you know, with a form of Hindu radicalism that attacks Muslims. I mean, you know, we've had this resurgence of these religious nuts around the world, and they've become the core, you know, supporters of these kinds of dictatorial leaders. And I mean, I don't know what the hell you do about that, honestly. I mean, I'm not even getting into now, you know, Taliban and Al Qaeda and Iran and ones that are obviously because they say it, they're a religious state. I'm talking about ones that don't even claim to be a religious state, but you know, they're backed up by the worst of the and most radical racist religious groups. So
well, they assume that we're going to be hesitant to call them out, and I think the way to call them out is to say that we're not necessarily against religion. We're against this misrepresentation of religion, which is indeed an abomination.
yeah. Well, do we have anything good to say?
Well, the one thing
Trump's going to bring peace to the South Caucasus.
On that point, I will say there's this guy in Texas, James Tallarico, who looks like he's going to run for Senate for the Democratic primary, and he is a devout Christian evangelical whose faith teaches him to be progressive and to call out the hypocrisy of conservatives. And I'm sure there are some religious folks in Israel who sort of share the same. So there are these people out there. It's just a question of whether or not they can be politically successful and get enough traction.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you know, the tradition, obviously, and it's all over the world, but speaking in the United States, I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. was motivated by religion. I mean, you know, we certainly have had a religious left in the past, culturally, you know, and then religion kind of removed itself a lot from politics. And then we had the religious right sort of fusing with Reagan, with Falwell. And ever since then, they've kind of been the loudest voice, but it hasn't always been that way.
I guess in America, the abortion issue drove that to a certain extent.
The what issue?
Abortion.
Yeah, but they saw that as a political winner is part of it, right? I mean, it's sort of the chicken or the egg question. Catholicism always was anti-abortion, right? But if you look back even at the Southern Baptist Conference in the 1970s, you can go back there and look at some of the things. They were pro-choice. They made a choice to become anti-choice zealots because it was a great issue to unite people on the right around. And that's why I've always said, I think some of it plays into, you know, anti-Semitic blood libel from, you know, that the drinking of blood of children, you know, and all that stuff. I think there's some of that there, but they needed an animating issue because it had been desegregation of schools, and after Brown versus Board and some of that stuff, they no longer had this sort of populist fury on that, and they needed a new issue, and they went shopping for one, and they found it in abortion. So I don't think that it's that abortion changed them; it's that they're corrupt elite leaders who are on the right convince them of this thing that they were never told before.
It's so strange because I spent most of my adult life in Europe and the Middle East. Lived in Cairo for a while. Lived in London. You mentioned this notion of moving to Italy. I see politics in Europe, and God knows Europe is all kinds of messed up. Has been throughout history. The details are well known.
Yeah.
But at this point, society seems less healthier than in the U.S. The right-wing populists in Europe, I'm no huge fan, but they're not as crazy. I mean, they have a basic point, which is we want to let in the whole planet because we kind of like our culture here, and I don't think that's stupid. It is what it is. It's a whole separate issue. But you don't have people in Europe, for example, who think the government's bad.
Right, by definition. Yeah,
the famous Reagan quip about the scariest words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I had a friend lived in Cairo, this Texan guy, mad as a hatter, and he's a total conservative, and he loved to quote that. I remember asking him, all right, so I get your point, but surely you understand that some things will not exist unless the government, that's part of a social contract, headed all the way back to John Locke, would provide. Because there's no profit in it. So surely you agree that in addition to highways, the government should provide every 6-year-old with a first grade education. I mean, that should be right? Every 6-year-old should have a first grade education. And the guy's answer, and he wasn't kidding, and he wasn't trying to be funny, was absolutely, Junior, as long as their parents can pay for it. And he meant it. Now, you don't have people this berserk in America, in Europe. You just don't. If they exist, I never met them. They like.
No, I just again that
will bankrupt them.
That was my reaction, and that was why it was just. We always have had more of that. It's always been different. I lived in France. I lived in England, but this time, and even over the last year, it's gotten so much worse with Trump. So maybe I noticed it that much more, because people here are not just unhappy, depressed. They're a bit fearful with what's going on with ICE. Obviously, we now have a Stasi walking around with the masks on their faces and whatever, and not identifying themselves, attacking people. And the people in Italy, they have got one of the most conservative governments right now in Giorgia Meloni that they've had since Mussolini. And yet she very clearly came out and said, we respect the electoral process. When they were questioning whether, she's like, I think we're right. I think we're a majority. She's wrong. But point being, she said, we will respect the will of the people, as in that was almost a response when they asked her about January 6th, as in, no, we respect the will of the people. She herself is anti-gay marriage and anti-abortion, but she has said she will not push those issues. Is essentially admitted that a majority disagree with her. And on economic issues, to me is the big one, is that a lot of these conservative parties, I can't speak for everyone in Europe, the difference is they actually provide benefits to working class people. They don't just lie to them and say they're going to, and then save them all for the billionaires. Giorgia Meloni cut taxes for free, because as this freelance economy has grown, entrepreneurs or people that drive Uber and have 3 other jobs realized they weren't getting the same benefits as those that were at a regular. So they had the same tax rate, which I think is 43%. She cut their tax rate to 15%. So this helped up to $85,000 a year in salary, or 85,000 euro. So she actually helped like the middle class there and the working class in a way the right in America pretends to, but never actually does.
Yep.
And so people are happier. They're more secure. They believe in this weird concept known as leisure time. They see their friends during the week. And if they drink a little too much, they have siesta. It's just a completely different mentality. And we can get rid of Trump. Can we get back to having a sane balance of work and life and change our mentality? I don't know.
Well, that also raises an important question, and that is, can the world separate their view of the United States in terms of separate out Donald Trump from separate America as an ideal? And so, my question for you, Dan, and Cliff, you and I were talking about this the other week when you came back from Italy, but in terms of America's standing around the globe, and I get the intellectual argument about, oh, we want to be isolationists, we don't want to have troops around the world, but you still have to be engaged if you want to have influence even over your foreign policies around the world. And this Trump administration to disengage the way they have, I mean, what sort of impact have you seen in terms of America's overall standing around the globe?
Plummeted. I mean, its standing is terrible, with certain exceptions. The Israelis are very grateful for the support, as well they in a way should be. Although by helping Bibi, he's hurting Israel, but that's complex. In the simpler narrative, he's pro-Israel. Something similar goes for the moderate Sunni countries, Saudi Arabia, etc. He doesn't care about human rights. He doesn't give him trouble about that, and they like the way he rolls. And of course, Russia and Poland. But outside of that, people are stupefied by all the policies, by most of the GOP policies, the guns, the abortion, the healthcare, all of it. They're just like climate denial. They're like, what the hell? I mean, we don't understand the GOP.
Right.
But beyond that, the Trumpian mutation of the GOP, it's like insane. So they're just waiting for it to end. I think it's worse than it was 8 years ago, because everyone knew that everyone was willing to think that the first go around was kind of a mistake. It was because of the weird electoral college, and he really didn't win, and he's not really what the Americans want. But this time around, he really did win. And it was after he really did do terrible things and show who he is, and became a convicted felon and many other things. Having reelected him because of that, despite all the explanations and the Kamala Harris and all that's, I'm reminded of a line from a James Bond movie, Live and Let Die. That type of mistake is tough to bounce back from.
Good movie, by the way.
Even if Trump goes, the disgrace of it will remain for quite some time. Now, who knows? If we get a great president next time around, and maybe it can be made to be forgotten, but America certainly no longer has the moral force of a country that can be trusted on to be your friend, to not do nonstop bullshit, to not elect a nut job, and to venerate the truth. Things that used to be America. Look, I realized something a couple of years ago at AP, right? Like, you'll notice I ran half the planet because I never got to run the world. The leadership of AP, the heads of, I don't want to name names, but you can look up who they were. It was weird. I realized something about true leadership. True leader is a person who doesn't care about sounding stupid. Doesn't care. They'll say 2 + 2 is 5. And they know it's not. And they dare you to say otherwise, and no one does, because they're true leaders. Now, the Europeans don't have such leaders. The European leaders, and the public doesn't want that. All the European leaders, all of them are like 2 + 2 is 4. Don't think I'm stupid, because I'm not. I know basic third grade arithmetic. Trump is 2 + 2 is 5. Like Putin is, like a lot of these elected populists are. They're bullies about lying to you all the time, and somehow trick the people into wanting it. And that's not good for your brand in the world. It just isn't. If you're going to be that kind of leader, it's a bad look. If you're going to be re-electing that kind of leader with a popular vote majority, the world is watching and wondering what on earth. And they're all looking for a plan B. I mean, Cliff, you talk about plan B in Italy. Europe's looking for a plan B for like an ally. You know? They're going to spend money on their own defense, but they won't rely on the U.S., but they may not even like the U.S. anymore, this version.
Well, I don't really see why they would like this version, and I don't see why they could ever, I mean, unless we showed for a whole lot of years that we had passed some sort of massive reforms so that this wasn't possible again, the situation. Sure. I mean, how could you? I mean, look, it took the historic election of Obama for them to even get over Bush and what he did in Iraq, and he went his own way there and rejected NATO. He wasn't as obnoxious publicly about things, although certain other members of the administration like Dick Cheney were, but Bush himself wasn't as obnoxious and sort of telling other leaders to screw off and all of that. But we went our own way. They offered us help after 9/11. We rejected it. We did all these things, and like for all of Bush's screw ups with all of this, and the fact that he was listening to some fundamentalists and some populists on the right, that were not as nearly what Trump's done. But we needed like this amazing historic thing. Oh my God, we elected this black guy named Barack Hussein Obama. How the hell did that happen in America? And it was probably the only thing that brought us back from that. So I don't know what brings us back from this, because as you said, you can't just say like you did in 2016, oops, the Electoral College sucks and we need to get rid of it. And blah, blah. I mean, we elected
By the way, the Electoral College alone, the world looks at how America goes about its business. And I mean, I don't know. I can't even explain it. I can't justify it. There is no equivalent to the Electoral College. And of course, the U.S. presidency is so important that they're all watching CNN and John King and trying to figure out, what happened and where there's a hanging Chad and where there's a gerrymandered district. And it's like, how could this happen?
Well, who
like
was it? Was the French?
I gotta jump in real fast. I have to jump in real fast because I got to go pick up a kid at camp. But Dan, I just want to say a pleasure talking with you. And thank you so much for being on with us. Great chatting with you. Hang in there with everything in Israel. And I hope your optimism is fulfilled and becomes reality. And Cliff, thank you as well. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for being here, as always.
Great meeting you, David.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, David. I'm going to have to also go pick up a kid soon too, but we'll have a couple more minutes. I mean, I was just going to jump off what you said there, Dan, where, I think which I'm trying to think which leader it was. I think it may have been the French. It wasn't Macron, but I think maybe their prime minister, one of their ministers, who may have said the free world can't every 4 years sit there staring at a swing county in Wisconsin and wondering what our fate will be. I mean, that was a pretty good way. I mean, again, like it should have been obvious. This is why it can't just be blamed on Trump. Mitch McConnell spent so much time corrupting our system, unleashing money into it, destroying the courts, so that we wouldn't have the ability to make a lot of these reforms and move. I mean, Electoral College is an 18th century thing. It is not a 21st century thing, and we can't move forward, into a place with any responsibility.
This fetish of the Constitution sounds like a good thing, but not necessarily, because it makes nonsense impossible to change. The Electoral College means that if you're running for president in the U.S., you don't have to campaign in the nation's capital or in the top 3 cities. No reason to go to Washington, Chicago, New York, or LA. None. Zero. Now, that alone is obviously absurd, yet that's a situation. In fact, the only places that matter are places that randomly are either really small or evenly divided or rural.
Yep.
How is that? I mean, that what the founding fathers wanted? Anyway, if they did, which they didn't, who cares?
I just say, right. There were guys, many of whom owned slaves some 200 plus years ago. So they did some, what I would argue, radical things for their time in saying that even those that didn't come from aristocratic birth should have the right to vote. I mean, for its time, there were some very progressive things. They also did some very terrible things. And the truth of the matter is we're long past that. It's a stupid system, but it also doesn't change the fact that, whenever Democrats have power, we don't use it. You know about nice liberals, we wimp around. I bring this up all the time, so I'll bring it up again before we go, which is the filibuster exists nowhere in the Constitution. Does not exist. It was very clear from neither do parties. The Constitution talks about a presiding officer in the Senate, vice president, and the Constitution talks about the Senate as a majority chamber. Therefore, at any point when Kamala Harris was the presiding officer, or Joe Biden, or keep going back, they could have stood up and said the filibuster is unconstitutional. Essentially, when you look at the coalition that Republicans put together of 2 senators from states that have more cows than people, that you often find a filibuster of 40 Republican senators based in states like South Dakota, North Dakota, Oklahoma. They end up representing, there was one filibuster one time, somebody did the math, they represented 17% of the population. You can't run a democracy that way.
A majority of the Senate represents a quarter of the population.
Right.
A vote for Congress in Wyoming is worth 40 in California. It's
right. So it's
what else is not in the Constitution? The right of every lunatic to bear an assault weapon.
Oh, you don't get me started on I did a lot of work.
Why do we give in to that?
Well-regulated militia means what it actually says. Well-regulated militia.
How is it that, given that it says a well-regulated militia, liberals don't fight this fight and don't. I
You know
mean, and
what
don't
makes
give
me the
what
angriest,
for to the
Dan?
Second Amendment people.
Yes, it makes me the angriest in the world when I see people on our side say, "Well, I believe in the Second Amendment, but," and I always say, "What are you talking about?
You
If
know
you
what?
believe in the Second Amendment, you don't believe anything these
Then you
libertarians
don't believe in the right of everyone to bear arms. You know
Right,
what the
because it had
proportion
nothing to
is?
do with
People,
you can say you believe in an individual right if you want to say that, but that's not in the Constitution. That's not
correct.
what was there. They in fact, if you read it correctly and you look at the historians Gordon Wood and plenty of others have talked about it from that period, what they'll tell you is quite simply is it was to put down, it wasn't an insurrectionist idea, it was an idea to put down the Shays Rebellion and the Whiskey Rebellion, and if we were attacked by Native Americans or the British, it was so that the federal government could not go and say states can't keep armories to protect themselves, but
It's just
states
nuts.
could. So if we really were following what the founders said, New York State or Ohio could ban all guns in Ohio. The federal government can't. They have to allow guns in an armory. But that's how different the actual document
But
was meant to be.
where is the discourse, man? I mean, it's
We don't
this
do
is
it.
not just a quibble about what's in or isn't in the Constitution. I mean, this is the reason why the U.S. has 44 times the gun rate, the death by gun rate of Britain. Britain banned guns 44 times.
Yes.
Now
This is the reason. You know what? I'll bring it closer to
They
home.
don't have less mental health problem than America
Right.
does.
Let me bring
That's
this.
not the difference.
Let me bring this home. This is the reason that my two boys had to hide in closets at their school when somebody crashed a car on their campus who was drunk, just randomly and whatever. And the police had to come to their campus, and there was somebody running across campus who was drunk and had crashed a car, and they had no idea if this was somebody who intended to commit a shooting. So my two boys had to it gets me so angry, had to hide in a closet with their teachers protecting them because of this country. You want to know why I think of moving to Italy? There would be a reason why.
My daughter goes to Colombia, and she was here visiting, and we had Iranian bombs exploding overhead. I was worried when she left Israel to go back to the U.S. because of the gun issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. See, I think you look at Israel, and you come to that conclusion about, well, will people stay there? Liberal. There's money. Will they leave? A lot of people here are liberal, and if they have enough money to leave, if we keep heading in this direction, when you point out how sane, parts of Europe, but there's also that country directly to the north of us that is a hell of a lot more sane than we are by leaps and bounds. I'm not sure. I already have had a few friends who have left this country to move.
It's frustrating. When I left America as a young adult to embark upon my travels in my 20s, I really had the notion of American exceptionalism. I kind of thought the rest of the world was, a nice museum at best, but a little bit ridiculous. And we're the ones that had it figured out. And it is a shame how much my view has changed. And part of it is because I figured out how dumb it is that none of us know how many feet are in a mile, and also the Electoral College, and also the politicization of the judiciary in America, where you elect sheriffs and judges and parliamentarians confirm Supreme Court justice. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. So not exactly a model for anyone, but also because legitimately much of the rest of the world is safer and does things better. And that's not so clear to Americans that don't travel the world.
Listen, in the pre-Reagan era, or even into the Reagan era, because the damage hadn't been done yet, you could say, that's why it's ironic to me that, make America great again. Conservatives are the ones who made America crap. They destroyed us. They stopped funding education. They stopped funding healthcare. They stopped building things that we used to build, right? Big things, Hoover Dam and such. They're the ones who, so infrastructure is falling apart. I mean, they basically all the things we were known for, great for, they've destroyed. And so you want to know why I don't think America is great? The right-wing movement for the last 40 years, liberals' failure to fully fight back against it, and a media wholly owned by corporations. These would be the reasons. So I'm now going to.
It still has the best sports, still has a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, there are some of those.
And it still has among the best people on earth, because when it was letting them in, they wanted to come. So there's a strong core in America that is truly excellent and kind of the best in the world. But it's not what's leading the country right now.
Well, why don't we end on that? Because I do have to go. I just got a text Dan, stay safe over there. Thank you for being here and offering your insight. Ask the question. Go subscribe to his Substack. I'll remind people to subscribe to Blue Amp, blueamp.co, and Cliffs_Edge at YouTube. And we'll have Dan back on here again or on Substack. This time, guys, there can't be a long goodbye. I really do have to leave, take care of some things. But thank you so much for being here, as always. And, as the sun sets slowly in the west, I bid you a fond farewell.
Thanks for having me on, Cliff, and for plugging Ask Questions Later. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I love your Substack.
Thank you so much. Subscribe, everybody. Take care, Dan. All right, guys, I am out. I got to run. We will be back next week, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. Catch me on the Substack machine. We'll have some interesting folks, including John Fugelsang. Take care, guys.